And joining me now is Tim von Schleh. Can you hear me, Tim?
I sure can, Rick.
Okay, good. We had a few technical difficulties, but now it's working out. Okay. So, for
Yeah,
those of you who don't know, Tim works with me, and we have for, gosh, 4 or 5 years or something.
5 years.
Gosh. And I met him online. We met online. I met him online because
Not like
he
that.
makes a natural deodorant product. And I thought, how the heck do I not know who this guy is when he's in Eugene making this product? And I should know who he is. So we met for coffee and had just really liked each other and had some fun and hung out for about a year. And then I said, can you come help me? Because he's really smart about certain things that I'm really dumb about. So Tim helps me out. He and Kathy are the only employees that we have. It's the three of us that do all this. So I said, Tim, there's a lot of information people out there talking about, stuff and you know me better than anybody, and maybe it'd be fun just to have a conversation, and you can ask me some questions, hard questions, whatever you want to do, and
Yeah,
because you know what people say and what they do and what they think, and it might be interesting just to not in any way attempt to clear anything up, but just to explain what we're doing or what we think.
sure. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, we do know each other quite well. That's it's
I I would be willing to bet that at least on my end, I know you know more about me than any other human person besides my wife.
yeah,
And
yeah.
probably in some areas, in terms of male stuff, you know more about me than my wife does, because that's guy stuff that my wife would go, I don't want to talk to you about that. Talk to Tim.
Of course. Yeah, and I can echo the same statements for sure. We over the years have had some pretty intense conversations
Yeah,
over time, and but I think that's you know uh, we're largely missing that, particularly with men
yeah,
in society these days. We don't have a ton of super close relationships, and I read at some point that loneliness is actually the largest killer of men, because they don't have the ability to get together and just hang out and be buddies anymore.
right. Well, and I think it's hard for a lot of guys to let down the image that they have of themselves
Right.
and and trust. I mean, and you and I both have trust issues.
Yes. But we
But
both implicitly trust each other.
right, because I think that we've had those hard conversations.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And
And
those,
not to reveal too much about your life, but you've been over the top open, and I think that really helps with and I don't think I have anything that I hide from you.
no.
I mean, this man has access to all my pages. He can, and I don't care whatever he found. It's like because he could ask me, and then we just go on from there. It's like, but I think that's really rare, and I think that I would love to see more, especially like you were saying. I'm not a woman, so I don't know how women react and what they do. Go to a woman's podcast and find out. But I can tell you, in terms of men, we need each other. You know,
Yep.
um,
Yeah, and relationships like you and I have, and I am eternally grateful for the fact that you had reached out to me at that time, and we had that sit down at Provisions on Fifth Street, and the rest is history. But you are definitely one of my most dear friends and confidants, and like I said, I'm eternally grateful for the relationship that you and I have.
so you hear people talk. What would you ask me?
Well, I think this one of the questions that we've had a conversations about in the past that I think is it's not relating necessarily to men, but as you know, my grandmother recently passed away, and she was she was the best woman that will ever be in my life, and you happen to also have a very special relationship with your grandmother, and so I was going to ask you about that relationship.
Yeah, it was funny because Tim was bringing it up because she just passed away this within a couple of weeks,
Yeah, just
and
last Wednesday.
right, and Tim knew that that was coming, and so he starts telling me the story of his grandma, and I'm going, oh my gosh, of course we have this in common. I mean, what else what else would we not have in common? And yeah, my grandmother was like, I remember when I was in therapy, and I was at the therapist, and she'd always, go through different topics. We never had a topic we were going to go through, but she said one time, she says, so Rick, who is the person who loved you no matter what, unconditionally? And I know parents were supposed to, as parents, love our kids unconditionally, but unless maybe you're a better parent than I am, other people out there. But I mean, you have expectations of your kids. You have to raise them so they're not picking their nose and eating it in front of other people, and they're not screaming in grocery stores. And so you're not always, you love them, but unconditionally is a little bit tough. But for a grandma or a grandparent, I think you can hit that sweet spot with that. And my grandma did that for me. So I said to the counselor, my grandmother. And she goes, well, tell me about her. So I was just telling her stories about grandma and me and what she did. I got caught stealing when I was a kid, when I was in, like 15 or something. And my parents just couldn't handle me. So then my punishment was they sent me to grandma's house for the summer, like a whole summer. I was in heaven. I mean, she let me smoke cigarettes, and and my uncle lived in the same house, and he let me smoke pot, and I was having a great time. And she was not like a bad person or anything, but she just, she goes, Ricky, just don't tell your mom and dad. But she knew what I needed. I needed love. I needed someone to pay attention to me. And she always did that. And she'd go, Ricky. So I got caught. I'm going to sound like a bad guy. But when I was a kid, I got caught shoplifting, and my grandma and my mom were there. And I was shoplifting, and they caught me, and then they called my grandma and my mom in. It was awful because, I mean, here you are, you're so embarrassed. And we got in the car and drive home, and my grandma lived next door to me. And I remember she got out of the car and she looked at me. She had tears in her eyes, and she says, oh, Ricky, what you did today, I hate what you did, but I'll never stop loving you. And I never forgot that, because it was showing me that unconditional love, and all that. So all these stories kind of came up with this therapist. And as I was leaving, my therapist was really big on setting kind of creating a monument. In the Bible, in old times, when God did something important with someone like Abraham, he would tell him to build an altar, like out of rock, in a spot, just so every time where he passed a lot. So like on a pathway. So outside of your house, building a little rock patch that you look at. And when you feel like your life is going to hell again, you look at that altar and you say, no, on this day, I was healed of that. I got over it. I'm not going to keep doing this all over and over again. And so, it was April 20th. She said, do this. I did it. I'm getting in my car and I'm driving home, and I'm going, April 20th. God, what is that? I mean, what is that day? And all of a sudden I went, oh, that's grandma's birthday. So the day I'd gone to therapy, that she had no plans, picked out this topic, and it all happened on my grandma's birthday, which for me was like a little kiss from heaven.
Yeah.
Like going, I'm still watching you. I'm
Yep.
still here. And so, yeah, she was really important. And then she died. She was really sick. She had diabetes, had to have one of her legs amputated. And I remember it was like 3 days before my wedding. And I was really concerned. My aunt was there, and I said, I really want grandma at the wedding, and I think I'll go get her. I'll just go pick her up. And my whole family looks at each other. Now I can see this. They're all looking at each other like, I don't know. We got an emergency here. And then my aunt says, well, Rick, she'll be there in spirit. And she goes, but she's just not, she can't be brought here. And Kathy and I got married. We went on our honeymoon. When I came back, I went to her grandmother, and, we saw her first. And I said, oh, so, and because I was always thinking about my grandma. And I just remember going, oh, hey, so how's grandma? And Kathy's grandma said to her, you probably need to talk to your mom and ask her. We don't really know. And
Yeah.
so I thought, oh, okay, I'm a blissful new married guy, I'm not thinking anything happened. And I go home to my mom, and the first thing I did is I walked up to her and I said, so Mom, how's grandma? And she says, well, honey, she died. I said, when did she die? She goes, 3 days before your wedding. And she goes,
Yeah.
and I decided, it was my decision, that we were not going to tell you because there's nothing you could do. It would have ruined your wedding and your honeymoon. And I just didn't think that would be the thing. And she goes, and then I just want you to know, though, we used all the flowers from your wedding, yours and Kathy's wedding, at her funeral. And grandma was buried with Kathy's bouquet. And it was
Yeah.
like, it was like, those are the things that, you just always remember. And even when I go to her grave in McMinnville, I mean, I feel it and I cry again, just because, but I say this to my friends when their parents die and stuff like that, because more and more that's happening as you get into your 60s. And I'm always telling people, the thing you have to remember though, is that, that you love someone so much that it can make you hurt this bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we forget, is it's not, yeah, it's sad because you won't see him, again, in this whatever form we're in now. But the fact that you can feel that badly about losing someone because they meant that much to you, um, you're lucky to have that. Because
Yeah.
how many people do you get in your life like that? And I mean, when my mom died, it was sad, and my dad too, even though he and I didn't get along. It was still, it was still, sad that way. But yeah, it's, I really, this is kind of the warp side of me. I'm really I'm really drawn to death because, one of my favorite places, and my kids thought this is so creepy, is I love cemeteries
Yeah.
because I walk through them. In fact, I want to be cremated because I do not want to be put in a box. I'm claustrophobic, and even if I'm dead, I think I'll be
Yeah.
claustrophobic. And
Right.
I don't want to spend eternity or however long it is. Go, "Ah!" I think my worst nightmare would be to be buried alive. Like
Oh
that. To bury,
gosh.
oh, that would just be. I would probably just kill myself, like in there, just to get it over with. But I love cemeteries because it's like you walk through and it's peaceful because all these people have made their choices and they're done.
Right.
you know they don't have, whatever regrets they have, it's over. Whatever dreams they had are either realized or they're done, and they're going to be on to a new thing, whatever that is. Um, but so when I go to a cemetery, um, I find it, even when it's my relatives and stuff, I find it kind of charming because these were real humans. They
Yes.
were real people, and I would not be here, even though I never knew either of my grandpas. When I stand by their graves and I look at them and I think, God, wonder what you were like, and I wonder what you would think of me, and what would you say to me, and I like to imagine. I think that would be really fun to write a book like that, to write a book about going into, meeting for the first time all these people in your life, like your grandfather, the people you didn't know,
Yeah.
and you
People
get,
that contributed to your existence.
yeah, and then you get introduced to them, and then they say, um, "Oh yeah, you were on television, and what's television?" You know,
Right. Yeah.
you
Exactly.
know,
Yeah.
and what did you do? I sat in a box and talked to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, but just to see, um, that connection. And I feel that with, not like with the dead. I just mean when I walk through a cemetery, I just think it's so peaceful because, I mean, life's hard. I think there's a lot of struggles. We all, you see people that are just, um, having a real hard time. And I think, nobody in a cemetery has a difficult time anymore.
Right. Do you think that because do you think that being closer to death allows you to understand life more?
I do,
I do.
yeah. If you think, if because like when I had cancer, I was really scared when they
Yeah.
said you have cancer. Well, and one is, I had a father who was a hypochondriac, and his mother was a hypochondriac, and anytime you had a pain, it was like an emergency. And oh God, he had a bad heart. He had 2 quadruple bypasses. But every time something hurt, he thought he was having a heart attack.
Yes.
And, that's how he lived his life. And so his mother died of cancer. And I remember as a little kid, I was 5 or something, but I remember he said, cancer is the worst thing that can ever happen to you. So now
Right.
roll ahead, 40 years. I'm at the doctor and the doctor tells me you have cancer. And Rick Dancer, the man, understands you can fight this. But Rick Dancer, the little boy, hears his dad saying, this is the
Right.
worst thing that can ever happen to you.
Yes.
So, so then, but you know what I mean? I think that whole experience made me come alive, because then I could live
Exactly.
again. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You
Yes.
get that close to death and you realize I didn't die. And, and it makes you, I've had many people say to me, "Oh, I remember when you were on the news. I really liked you. Now I don't really like you anymore." It's like, that's because you know what happened when Rick Dancer got cancer. When Rick Dancer ran for Secretary of State and lost, and faced that humiliation in front of the entire state of Oregon, that Rick Dancer is dead. So the Rick
Yeah.
Dancer you really liked, he was a big phony baloney person on television who was all full of himself and got told only nice things about himself from people, because all they do is come up and say nice things to you because, oh, you're the guy on TV. They didn't know me. And then the
Right.
Rick Dancer that erupted from tragedy and trauma, and is a I don't know. I think this is who I was always supposed to be, and I got trapped in a image of who people wanted me to be.
Right. And that
And
served a purpose for a time, but eventually you
right,
kind of had to shed that skin and
yeah,
evolve.
right. And what sometimes is hard is going, so you liked the made up version.
Yeah.
And so you didn't really like me. You liked what you thought was me. And now that it's me expressing opinions and different ideas, and which Tim, I will never understand that about human beings. It's like that we've gotten to a point where we're that scared of someone else's opinion when it's
Right.
different than ours. You know what I mean? I can honestly say people come on my page and I'm going to argue with you, but you don't threaten me because you disagree with me,
No.
and yet the reaction I get a lot is like, you know like when they call Trump Hitler, they
Yes.
act like I'm like part of the you're
The
a
SS or
MAGA.
something.
So it's like, and then it reminds me so much that I say this a lot, but it does, I hated middle school, hated it. Not
Yeah.
only is your junk starting to grow and you're getting hair all over yourself, you don't know what's going on with your body, and you have these emotions and you're starting to get turned on by girls, and all this stuff's going on in your life. You don't know what's going on. And then you got creepy other people who are doing the same thing, but they're bullying you. And I was bullied. I think everybody was, but I was really tormented. Like, I'd
Yeah.
be afraid. A good day for me when I was in middle school was a good, and I remember this. I'd get up. We had a long driveway from our house, so the bus would stop, and then we had a long driveway that went down to our house, a blacktop driveway on a private road. And I remember, if I could get off the bus and down the driveway without hearing somebody scream something nasty to me, that was a good day. Because they'd
Wow.
have to get Ricky David, and then at school, kids picking on you. So that shaped me a lot,
Yeah.
because so when I did get on television and had that job, it was kind of a big fuck you.
Yes.
You and I'm not saying that's healthy or good, but it was kind of I remember one time, I'll tell you interesting, that this is kind of a bad story, but um, there's a kid in my high school, and I won't use his name. We'll just say Brian or something, but he's in my high school, and he always like picked on me all the time. I remember one time I got on this, they'd have a, popularity contest. They'd have this court. It was the King Arthur court, and you'd had the friendliest member of the senior class, the best member of all these things.
Yes.
Well, I got voted friendliest member of the senior class. And my parents came to this assembly because I was kind of a hood. I was kind of a stoner. So I never really, and then I stopped smoking pot. So I smoked pot until I was about freshman in high school. And then I kind of went, this isn't doing anything for me. I'm mean. When I smoke pot, I'm really mean. So it's not a good drug for me.
Yeah.
I didn't make a lot of friends that way. So I got off of, I stopped smoking pot and just kind of changed my life and my friends and stuff. And so I hear now I'm on this court, and it's kind of an honor. And my parents, they were teachers in the past, and so they were very, that was very important to my dad for people to be popular. So they come to this assembly, and when they announce my name, this whole group of real popular guys start booing me, and I didn't hear any of the cheers. All I heard was the boos.
Right.
And then afterwards, my dad came up and said, "Why do those people not like you?" And it was
Yeah.
like, well, I don't know. And he was ashamed. And I remember my mom pulling me aside and saying, "Honey, don't worry about it." But that was
Yeah.
kind of how I grew up,
Yes.
was in that, you know, that kind of thing. So I'm in Eugene. I'm on television. My wife and my son, my Jake was just like a little baby, and we're at the grocery store. And this kid who was so nasty to me walks up to me at the grocery store, and that was in Hillsboro. So this is
Yeah.
not in the same world. Well, apparently he was in contracting now, and he was working on a project in Eugene. And he comes up and he goes, Rick Dancer. Oh my God. I told all of our friends back in high school, our friends,
Yeah.
like I was in your group. And I told them all that you're on TV and that like you're really good and da 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 da, and how we were friends and all this stuff. And I became Sissy Spacek in that, the movie in high school, and
Yes.
Sissy Spacek turns into that, like this
Yes.
demon. But I wasn't mean that way, but I went, and I knew exactly who he was. And I said, "Oh, it's really good to see you, Dave." And he goes, "No, no, no, I'm Brian. Brian, blah blah blah."
Yeah.
And I went, oh, yeah, yeah, no, yeah, I remember you. I mean, I knew exactly who he was, but I was
Yes.
gonna. This is my chance to just go,
Yeah.
And then he goes, "Yeah, it's so fun. We should hang out and all this." And I'm just sitting here looking
Whoa.
at him and going, "You were so nasty to me." And my wife, when he walked up and said his name, I had told her before about this guy because she
Yeah.
looked at me and she's like going, "Oh, whoa, this is the guy that Rick really can't stand."
Yeah.
And he's just here kissing my butt because I'm on television. And so he gets done. So he says, I said, "Now, didn't you used to hang around?" And I named all these really unpopular people
Yes.
that he would never have done. I mean, it was like crushing him. And he goes, "No, no, I didn't hang out with them. I hung out with," and he names all the popular people. And I said, "Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. I kind of remember them, you know." And then he gets ready to leave. He goes, "Well, yeah, it was really good seeing you." And I go, "Yeah, so his name is Brian, right?" So that's it. The fictitious name is Brian. So I go, "Yeah, it was really good seeing you, David." And he goes, "No, it's Brian." And I went, "Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Brian. It's good to see you." And we walked away. And my wife looked at me and she goes, "That was so mean. I mean, you were just not going to let that guy off." And I go, "Honey, I'm taking this as God just gave me this opportunity. And I know that's probably wrong. And everybody's going to like go, ah." But
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, it felt so good."
Isn't it funny how that kind of persona that you have to take on when you're in middle school or high
Yeah.
school or whatever, it sort of sticks with you, like my experience. I was always the biggest, most athletic kid when I was in school, and so, I still kind of embody that. I wasn't a bully. I hated bullies, and I would
Yeah.
go after them. Um, but just talking to many of my other friends. It's like you take on whatever that persona is, and
Right.
20 years later, that's your inner dialogue still is that person that either thinks they need to prove themselves or
Right.
whatever, right?
Yeah. I don't think we know, or I don't think we understand how much we impact other people. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? and the
Right.
things we say. And I'm just as guilty in other areas. I've never bullied people. I mean, maybe that was bullying. I don't know. I thought that was just vindictive. But
Sure.
but when you leave a mark on people's lives, and I think, and it's not like that traumatizes me anymore. You know what I mean? It's not like I live my
No.
life that way.
Right.
Um, but one thing I think that is really, and I try so hard to work on this, is what's really hard I hate to be misunderstood,
Yes.
because my whole life was, dad not understanding me, people not understanding,
Yep.
people putting me in this box. And when I remember I had a speech teacher, and I was super, super shy, and I never talked. I mean, I was real quiet in classes and stuff. I remember my sister, I have a twin sister, and Judy was a straight A student. She'd go to class, and then they'd get me and they'd go, "Oh God, this guy's really the opposite of her," because I was pretty quiet.
Yeah.
And because I was just shy, because I didn't want to stand out to bring on more attention or something like that. And I remember I forgot what I was starting to say. What's the story?
Well, what do you think it was that you were shy? What do you think that it was that brought you out of that shell?
That was the teacher at a community college, and I had to fill in a class, and the only thing available was a speech class. When I was in high school, I took a speech class, and I took an F because I wouldn't get up in front of the kids and do a speech on how to make a submarine sandwich. I mean,
Yes.
that's how afraid I was. I'd rather have the F and get yelled at by my dad than to get
Yes.
up and give a speech. So now
Yep.
I take this speech class. It was mostly adults because it was at a community college, and I felt comfortable with these people. And I went into the class and had this teacher who he used to write those TV show Bewitched.
Oh,
And
yes.
he was retired, and his name was Paul, and I can't remember anything else, but he was so good to me. And he saw that, every time I'd get up to do a planned speech, I was just terrible.
Yeah.
And one day I remember walking into class, and he said, "Okay, it's improv day. Um, you guys just make it up. And I want you to come up and just tell me something that really truly did happen, but and let us know what it is." And he goes, "And Rick Dancer, you're first." And I got up and told this story about having soap, taking a shower and having soap, Irish Spring, and hardly any soap left. And I'm washing it up, but and I built it all up into a bigger story. But this really happened. The soap, all of a sudden I look and it's gone. And I'm like, well, I got to dry. So I dry myself off, put my clothes on, and I'm walking around school, and all of a sudden I'm like, what in the hell is that? And I'm feeling something like that. I reach back, and here's this bar of Irish Spring on my back, stuck on my back. And so I took the story, and I just, I blew it and just made it big. I mean, really, I had the class, and it's just, everybody was just hysterics. And the teacher looked at me. I looked, and the teacher looked at me. I'll never forget this. He goes, "Rick Dancer, who are you?" And I
Yeah.
remember looking at him and going, "I'm a communicator." And he goes, "Then go communicate." And that turned my life around, because,
What gave
and
you the
another guy,
confidence? Go ahead.
another guy was, I had a boss named Harold Eastman at a lumber yard.
Yes.
And Harold was, he came up to me about 2 weeks into my job, and I said, "These people want 2x4s, nails, and bullshit, and you're not giving them any bullshit." And 8 years later, when I left, he cried and said, "I think we created a monster." But he didn't mean it that way. He meant, you found this
Yes.
thing inside of you that related to people. You know what it did, Tim? It gave me the ability to be me in front of people. I love to flip shit to people and have fun with them, and
Yes.
if you see me at my gym in Eugene and Springfield, I am the same guy in Capitol here in Helena,
Yep.
is walking around, and now people, they tease me back and they love it. So that's how I start relationship with people, is, you're going up and going, "So when you work out, are you trying to build muscle, or you just want to look like that?" And then we all, then they all laugh. And then I got this friend who's really funny guy. And he's real shy and quiet. And all of a sudden he's like super mean to me. And it's so fun. I love it. Come up, and I'm gone for a week, and he goes, "Oh my God, Rick, I thought the senior citizens bus broke down." And so that's the way you relate to people, because it's to have fun with people. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I really do enjoy them. And I think they taught me how to put that into practice.
Sure. I'm curious, because you had such a poor experience with the public speaking class in high school, what gave you the confidence to then take another one?
Yeah, I think, Tim, I honestly, as I remember it was that or algebra. And
Okay.
I knew I could at least fail with a D or a C in speech, but if it was algebra, I would be like an F. I mean, there
Yeah.
was be no way I got it. It was almost like God goes, okay, here's the thing you're the absolute worst at.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to show you the thing that someday you're going to be
Yeah.
super
Amazing at.
proficient at.
Yes.
And so the only way you can, and maybe the lesson there is, like, I know this is true of your life too, is maybe the only way you can find the gift is if you face the curse,
Right. Right. Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely.
And I think we're all afraid to do that. We're afraid to really, um, you know, to look at our imperfections or the things that we screw up, or what we um, aren't good at. And, and I think if you do that too long, then you never find out what you're good at. You know what I mean? Because you're so
Right.
busy looking at, my parents, you had to be good at everything.
Yeah.
And I'm not,
Right.
so why not find out, I hope what I've done with my kids is find out what you're good at. And then the stuff that you're not good at, just don't focus on it.
Yeah.
You're not going to be a mathematician,
Right.
and so what does that mean? That means if I'm not a mathematician, then I got to find that other thing that I'm going to be. And um, you know, both my sons are a good example. Jesse's the one that comes to mind right now as my youngest. Is he did terrible in school, and in college he was just not doing well at all. And we just said, quit wasting your money. Why don't you spend that money and go figure out who you are? And now
Right.
he's a hunting guide and a fishing guide, and he loves his life, and he has the most passionate existence on the
Yes.
planet. And I'd like to think that part of that is because his mom and I have really encouraged him and said, okay, so you're not the greatest student. Not everybody is, but you're really good at telling stories and understanding things and teaching people. So what would that make you? And you love the outdoors. So find the life that, because God, Tim, people, what do we get? 80 years here if we're lucky,
Yes.
you know? And I think people waste their time doing shit that they don't even want to do,
I agree.
and they never find that thing that makes them come alive.
It's funny because our education system is kind of set up in a
uh,
way that the expectation is, perfection or excellence across, so many disciplines, right? Whether it's math or science or writing or whatever it is, and it's just not, it's not for everyone. And we don't allow the individual, especially as a developing adult, say through middle school and whatnot, we don't allow those people to really try and hone in and figure out what it is that they are passionate about, and focus more on that. I'm not taking away from the fact that you should have knowledge in other disciplines, but for somebody that is really good with their hands, allowing them to develop more hands-on things, whether it's
right.
something like being in the outdoors or woodworking or whatever it is, some of those more technical things, we just don't have enough support for those people. And consequently, now look at how well those jobs pay.
Mike Road is big on this, as a
Yes.
whole nonprofit. Because look, during the pandemic, did we need another college professor? Hell no.
Right. No.
What did we need? We needed lumber people. We needed builders. We needed
Yeah.
contractors, plumbers,
Yep.
people that could work street equipment, heavy equipment. We needed
Yep.
people with real skills, and they were the valuable jobs. And all the other people's jobs were kind of like, yeah, we don't really need you right now. And I think that was good because it showed us kind of the importance, and how much we've devalued hard work, labor, that kind of stuff. And and they wanted to get more kids in college, so they kind of, but why can't we just, okay, here's the college track, but why do we have to take one side down and build the
Right.
other one up? Because they didn't
Yeah.
want people doing that. And yeah, you're right. Some of the best paying jobs are going to be in labor right now. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Those
Yeah.
people, contractors, are making like good money. And
Right.
then you've got people that have college degrees with $100,000 in debt, and they're working at Burger King.
Yes. Yeah.
So The other thing I think that does is when you say, and like you, I'm not saying that because I was bad at math, I had to learn some math. But you know what? I can tell you without a doubt, and I know people will disagree with me on this. I was terrible with algebra and stuff. I have never used algebra in my life
Right.
in a way that I had to learn it. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And
Yep.
it didn't make sense to me. And I remember my math teacher in junior high, his name was Mr. Payne. Seriously. And I was learning doing algebra, and I couldn't get, X times Y. Well, then you multiply this times that. Well, okay, so why don't you just put the multiplication? No. It was all too like woo
Yep.
for me. I couldn't get it. And he'd always say, you're going to use this. You're going to use this. So I'm running for state office, for Secretary of State. I'm up in the Hillsborough area where I grew up. Mr. Payne is at my speech. And so I go up and he introduces himself, and I'm like, I knew exactly who he was, because
Yep.
I didn't like, he's like a terrible teacher. He was not nice to me at all. But he was like, so I get up to give my speech, and I started this way, because that's how you give us. If you want to, like, if I was teaching somebody to give a speech, work the room before you get there, before you start, and you find a conversation that goes on there.
Yep.
And that's how you start. And so I got up and I said, hey, everybody, I just want to announce that my 7th grade math teacher, Mr. Payne, is here. Mr. Payne, would you stand up? He stands up and nobody claps. And I said, and when I was in school, Mr. Payne used to always tell me I was really bad at algebra. And Mr. Payne would tell me someday I'm going to use that in my life. And so, Mr. Payne, I would just like to stand here before you and tell you, I have never used algebra in my life. And the audience went nuts, because everybody would love to go back and tell your teacher that, like that.
Yes.
And he turned kind of red, and then he smiled and clapped, but it was so funny. And that little kid inside of me was like going,
Yeah, exactly. This conversation is a lot of retribution for Rick Dancer.
Yeah, this should be called, this is the retaliation of Rick retaliates.
Yeah, Rick against the world.
And none of it was mean spirited. I think it was just, I think if you live long enough, you start finding out that so much of what we worry about and are concerned about just don't matter. And you almost always get a chance to settle it in your own head and your heart. You know what I mean? And because the only reason I had that visible of a thing is because I was on television, and those things don't happen. I mean, when you live the little TV life and when you live your life in the public eye, you pay for it.
Yes.
But you also get some priceless moments like that, or moments where, I was just recently in a little town called Libby in Montana. It's 2,200 people. And I'm at a gym and walk out, and a lady walks up and she goes, oh my God, Rick Dancer. I used to watch you on the news in Springfield. And you smile because you go, thank you, God. That's a gift.
Yes.
And I understand that. And I know, I think I was always pretty responsible with that. I didn't use it. I had co-anchors that would, do you know who I am?
Yeah.
I'd say that to people. And that was never me.
Yeah.
I was always trying to diminish when people would when I used to go to schools and speak. I remember I used to go to kids. And I said, you guys all are so impressed because I'm on TV. But if you don't watch the news for 2 weeks, nothing's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
If the garbage man doesn't show up, you've got a health risk and a real problem. If the sewer plant manager stops mulching our shit,
yes,
we've got diseases that are going to start coming. So my job, while you make it really important, really in the big picture, it's really not as important as some of these jobs that you would look down on. And those are really the valuable people in the world,
Right. A lot of those people
that didn't like math. Job. I knew when I was doing my job, especially towards the end. I mean, I think you share information, you share news, but I don't know. I mean, I don't look back and regret it. I loved what I did. I love telling stories. And I think there's too many people that you told their story and you personalized it, and that makes a difference. I think the actual job itself is kind of bullshit.
Yes.
And it, it's just regurgitating information. And especially today when I look at, news people. And did you see, I just saw a recent article and I don't know this for a fact, but I saw it in an article. And I can't quote my sources. That's what people do all the time. If they want to try to discredit you, who's your source? Like you don't even know who they are anyway. And then if I tell you it's Bill Johnson, oh yeah, he's a left wing, right wing, got to put in jail once, and he drinks too much, and that's all they're looking for. So I never give sources. I said, oh, you can look it up. There's this thing called Google, and just put that in there, and unless it has to do with Trump, Google will tell you.
Yes.
But that Good Morning America is tanking. Like
all of legacy media seems to be.
All legacy media is just going under, and CNN's not doing well at all, and MSNBC is maybe up for sale, and and I think what they didn't understand, but this has been going on for decades. Because I remember even when I was in the business, there was a tilt in the news, a very left tilt, but then we had to give. You had to give both sides. My boss would have never allowed me to do anything that they do today.
Right.
but there's it. It was always kind of, okay. So here's an example. So, we had a woman in our newsroom, very pro-abortion. I'm not pro-abortion. I'm really for. It's your body, your choice. I want my body, my choice when it comes to a vaccine, and you get your body, your choice when it comes to an abortion. Not my business.
Yeah.
But I vehemently disagree with it. I don't like the idea of taking the life of anything.
Sure.
I don't like capital punishment.
Yeah.
I am pro-life person. I don't think you should kill a baby. I don't think you should kill an adult when they're in jail because they did something. To me, that's up to God. And I have a really good friend who was involved in a terrible, terrible murder. She was almost murdered. Her friend was murdered, and all four of the guys were killers. And she and I completely disagree on that. But she says, "But I still love you."
Right.
And those are the. It's like, yeah, we can. But I am not in your situation either. I wasn't facing that. So I would never be arrogant enough to put myself in that place like that. I'm just saying, for me, that's my thing. But my boss would allow this woman who was clearly involved in these groups to do stories on that, as you wouldn't allow me to do them because you're biased because you're a Christian. Well, wait, she's biased because she's pro-abortion and goes to these meetings and is part of this group.
Right.
So how, and you, that was all, you lived with that all the time. And if you brought up, those kind of things, it was always, put down. I remember one time there was a measure, and this is back when gay rights were just new. And there was a measure, measure 13 or something about schools where they were going to make it more open or something with gay stuff. And so I did a series, and I talked to a young girl who was a lesbian and in school. And I talked to a young girl who was straight and in a homeschool about their feelings on the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, at first my boss didn't want me to do it. She wanted somebody else to do it because she thought I'd be biased. And so, like the other people wouldn't.
Right.
So I got a photographer who totally disagreed with me, and we put it together so that he'd keep me straight, so to say, and I'd keep him on the same line. And so we did this whole series. We got every award that year. Wow. And all the people, the judges, when they awarded it, said, "We've never seen a more fair story done on this subject." And it was just like a big screw you. You know what I mean? Let me do my job. But that was not normal. It was more normal to hand those stories to other people. And I don't think it was because, well, I don't know. They thought because I was a Christian and I was this, I would be more biased than someone who wasn't, who sided with this whole side. And that always frustrated the hell out of me because I thought, wait a minute. So how come I can't be more fair, or at least looked at the same way with the same kind of, consideration that Rick will do the right thing when, well, of course he can't because he's a Christian and he doesn't believe in abortion. Yeah. So there's always been in the media an undertone of, we know what's right. We'll tell the other side, but we know the right answer. Whereas a true journalist would be, I don't know for sure what the right answer is. And that's how I went into that story. I don't know how open this should be, but let's hear what this person says and this person says. And I think what I was good at doing and what you're supposed to do as a journalist is trust the people to hear both sides and choose what's right.
It
That's what
sounds
it's
like
supposed to be.
yeah, it
But,
sounds like
but
good journalism is a combination between science and art.
yeah. So you put out the facts and you let people tell the story, and you don't try to educate them. You
Right.
don't try to sway them.
Yes.
You trust that people, but you know what they used to tell us when we were in the news business? Your average viewer, this is the consultants, your average viewer has a seventh grade education mentality.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you right there? So the journalists are going to speak down to these
Right.
little dumb people. And now I think it's probably even worse because they don't even give you both sides to figure out what it is. But there's
Yes.
some kind of trust level and I really did believe that, Tim. And I guess I don't know if I do or not anymore. I really did believe if you give people ample information, they will make the right choice. But now I think there's what's ample information, and it's so the algorithms twist it so that the only people coming on your page are people who agree with you, and the only people. I think that's why the legacy media does what it does, is because really the only people watching it are people that agree with that side. So they have to sell advertising, so they're sure as hell not going to do. When I was in the business, we rarely did stories on car dealers because
Yep.
car dealers were the bread and butter. So
Yes.
if a car dealer story came up, all the management from the station was down there in your newsroom. And with that, in the early days, my news director would fight to get them out of there.
Yeah.
In the latter days, they were, kissing each other's ass, and we were shutting down stories because that's part of the reason I got out, is because it just became you had salespeople being news directors. They weren't real
Yes.
news directors. And even the news directors I didn't agree with in the early days, at least they stood up for what was news.
Right.
But in the latter days, they were just sleeping with the upstairs, and it was
Yes.
disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, it's really hard to find any type of like impartial opinion in the media at all. And of course,
Yeah,
then that's going to cultivate the way that people think that reality actually is, and I think
right,
personally for me, we were talking about this before, not necessarily on this topic, but, there's a difference between generations. And so like the
right,
generation that you grew up in, you had high quality journalists,
right.
people like Walter Cronkite and things like
Uh-huh.
that they told the story in a way that they didn't try to sway you. They reported on the facts, and then therefore you could come to your own conclusion on things, right? And so now those people are still watching the news. They're really the only people that are really watching the news at this point, but they still have that same level of trust in the
Right.
legacy media, and so whatever is reported is fact, right? And people in my generation, it's like we've been lied to for so
Yep.
many years, whether it's like weapons of mass destruction and all of those types of things where you bought into them, and then only to find out this wasn't true. And so there's this huge distrust with the media for people in my generation now.
Right. Well,
And
what I think is really interesting is like it's still, even with people in your age group online that I see,
yes,
is if I put up an article that was done by a private journalist, and who's your source, and then
yeah,
that guy's, he's this, he's that.
right,
But if I put up something from ABC News who had David Muir basically attack one candidate.
yes,
Hold on.
that better have been important, Rick.
Yeah, that's weird. My wife tried calling me, and it
Oh, that's
threw it.
important.
Yeah, it threw everything off. You were gone. Could you still see
Oh,
me?
yes,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you were gone. It took it off my computer thing, and you were gone. But anyway, they show their bias. CNN, all of them are out there reporting about Russian collusion. Now we know that wasn't even true, and
yes,
and yet if I say this was found on CNN, they'll believe it.
yep,
Still, after they've been lied so much to by these people, and it's like, what in the world is that all about?
Well,
You
social
know, so
media has now become the cesspool as well, and that's where a lot of people in my generation, say, and younger, are starting to get their news from. But it's if it's posted and it seems legit, then it is legit.
right. That's what I love about podcasting is I think this is
Yeah.
open. Joe Rogan, all those people have opened up, Jordan Peterson, they've opened up doors to information where I don't need anybody else.
Right.
I'm not saying I get everything from Joe that's gospel truth, but I can sit and listen to a conversation and pick out. They're allowing me to again decide what the right answer is.
Yeah.
And so it's I think that's what, if legacy media is afraid of Donald Trump or whatever their biggest fear is, I think what they should be afraid of is themselves. And they've
Yeah.
done this to themselves. They've dug the hole and they just continue to bury themselves in it. And it's almost funny because I would be willing to bet, and I've heard this from other sources too. I think in a couple of years, it won't be around. It'll change. It's going to have to change. Just like, you know, I still the other night on TikTok, I was doing a live. They shut me down when I said, somebody came on and said, what do you think of illegal immigration?
Yeah.
And, in a question, and I said, well, obviously, if it's illegal, you shouldn't be here. If
Yes.
it's illegal immigration, and bam, I was down.
Yeah.
And they shut me down for one day. And it's like, wait a minute. What? Because I said illegal immigration, and
Yes.
because it is illegal immigration. It's
Right.
they're here illegally, and you can call them undocumented if you want to, but
Yeah.
that's just a pretty word. All the
Right.
pretty words we come up with to make something that's not right sound
Yes.
better,
Yeah.
and that they still do that. And I don't get it as much on Facebook. I do get throttled, as you know,
Yes, I
on
do.
Facebook and Instagram a little bit. TikTok is more shut you down, like for, they're trying to keep everybody pleasant and kind, and sometimes they'll leave it and sometimes they don't. I don't know. But we shouldn't be living under standards like that where, where we're afraid to speak our minds. You know what I
No.
mean?
Yeah, and I mean, don't you believe that the path forward in any aspect of life is through some sort of dialogue, and you have
Yeah.
to have opposing points of view, because if you don't, then there's no way for progress to be made. You can't
Right.
have two camps that don't even communicate with each other, because you'll never move forward with that.
And it's too bad that the middle is so, what's the word I want to
Well,
use?
the middle is no man's land, because if you're in the middle, then whoever you're talking to, they view you as being on the opposing side.
Right. I've been called this before, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think sometimes people that are in the middle are almost the fence people, and you
Yeah,
really have to get off the fence. And it doesn't mean you have to step into the Republican fence or into the Democrat fence. It means
sure.
that sometimes you have to be a little more progressive, and sometimes you have to be a little more non-progressive. And
Yes,
sometimes you have to be common sense, sometimes more socially minded, and sometimes more fiscally minded.
yes,
Because it's like you're making a decision. I've always said this: God gives you a brain and a heart, because if you just make your decisions with your heart, what do you have? Oregon. If you
yeah.
make your decisions just with your brain, what do you have? I have no idea.
No one does that.
But the whole idea is to put the two together so you can be compassionate, but also remember we can't afford to feed everybody. And
Yeah.
at some point, we must encourage people to work.
Yep.
And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about that. And I thought, yeah, what if it got down to where you really had to pay a living wage, but you had to buy your products in America,
Yep.
and these companies had to come back to America, and then that would put more people to work, and more people would be making more money, and they couldn't afford to stay home and just suck off the system. And maybe
Yes.
I think sometimes you have to do hard things like that. But we've got so many people that are such virtue signalers. It's like, because it looks, I get these people and I know what they believe, and they come online and then they're like, oh, we really have to be compassionate to this. And it's like, no, we really don't have to be compassionate. I finally heard it was Tim Dillon
Yep.
on this morning, and they were talking about, on this podcast, he was talking about letting people just sit on the streets is not kindness.
Yeah.
It's not kind to allow drug addicts to stay on the street and not get the help that they need. That is
Right.
not kindness. And he brought up Portland, Seattle, these cities that just let people sit out there. That's not, you don't get to camp on the sidewalk.
Right.
That's a
Right.
public sidewalk. You don't get to
Yes.
camp there.
Yeah.
And require things of people, and he was talking about nutrition and how on WIC and some of these other food stamp programs,
Oh,
they're
yes.
allowing you to buy Coca-Cola
Yeah.
on food stamps. Why?
Right.
Because Coca-Cola is paying to, and it is part of the bullshit. So
Yes.
why can't we take and help people change their lives by saying the only thing you can use food stamps for is healthy foods, and
Yeah.
we can give you, just like they do with WIC, here's peanut butter, here's cottage cheese, whatever it is, but it's stuff like
Yeah.
that. If you want to spend the rest of the money that you have that you make on your own or whatever it is on Pepsi and all that kind of stuff,
Yes.
then you go for it. But otherwise, the money we pay as taxpayers is going to go for healthy food. And
Right.
then and then we get people back on health again. When you got people walking into the hospital and their babies are sucking on a bottle full of Coca-Cola, that is not a good thing.
No.
And we have to make some limits like that. And I know I'd get people that would go, but that's uncompassionate. No, that's a reality.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, if you're not necessarily contributing to those costs, then why do you just get to do whatever you want with it? I mean, obviously there are
it's
some limitations on it. You can't buy things like
right.
alcohol, but if we're trying to promote a country that values their health, which it seems like we're starting to move in that direction,
Right.
then and we also obviously have an issue in this country where processed foods tend to be cheaper for whatever reason,
Right. Right.
and
Well, see,
that's a challenge.
I would be into allowing those people to be able to buy the organic at a discounted rate. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Make it
Well, we
so
need
that
to
if you're
find a
if you want,
way.
yeah,
Why is organic the expensive stuff when it's just
right,
grown naturally?
right, and they're charged. Yeah, well, somebody's making money,
Yeah, because they need certifications.
right? Yeah, and I remember seeing a guy I did a story on a farmer in God, way over past Baker City. I can't think of the town right now,
Yeah.
but he grew everything, and I said, so are you organic? He goes, oh no, he's from Minnesota. No,
Yeah.
I'm not organic. I said, but you don't use any chemicals or pesticides. No, he says, but I'm not organic because I can't afford the certification.
Exactly.
And I
Yeah.
went, oh, so all the neighbors came there and bought all their groceries from him
Yep.
because he was natural, but he wasn't certified organic. And that's a scam. That should be
Yes.
taken away too.
Exactly. Exactly. And you don't need that to put all kinds of dyes and chemicals and synthetic ingredients and stuff like that in food. You don't need a certification to do that. You don't even need to make a claim on the packaging at all that it contains those types of things. Yet for you to be organic, you have to jump through all these hoops, which makes it more expensive.
Yeah. Hey, Tim, we're at 58 minutes. And if I
We
make this
are.
past an hour, we're not going to get it on Instagram, and you're going to
Nope.
not be happy because that's your
Yeah.
job and you're not
I'll
going to
have
be
to
happy
edit
with
it.
me.
Yeah.
I'll make my intro really, really short.
Okay.
All
All
right,
right.
Tim von Schley, thank you for being here.
Yes. So
Thanks for
yeah,
all you
thank you
do
for
for me.
having me, Rick. It's always good
Oh
to talk
man.
to you.
All right, hang on. I got to figure this one out. There we go. All right. Thanks, buddy.